Welcome, old viewers and new viewers, to another episode of the Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA. This is the show where you learn all about conflict resolution strategies. I like to introduce original mnemonics of authors or of my own. For example, mine is the 5 A's of conflict resolution mnemonic. Now, I like to reserve the third Friday of each month for story time. Story time entails an analysis of a movie, drama, an event as it pertains to conflict, what went wrong or what could have been done better. The last Friday is reserved to have a guest. Now, this guest might be an expert in conflict resolution or might have something of value to share with all of us as it pertains to the theme of the month or that particular episode at hand. So as you know, this is the month of June, and the whole theme of this month has been all about spirituality, ethics, and conflict in the workplace as it pertains to different policies. So far, we've talked about mandates as it pertains to the vaccine. And last time we talked specifically about medical assistance in dying, AKA MAID. So I highly encourage you to watch the previous episodes if you have not watched them. So without much ado, today is the third Friday of June, hence story time. So I hope you're relaxed and sit back as you enjoy and partake of this episode. Some of the notions, again, might be sensitive. The whole topic of MAID is a controversial issue. I might evoke some feelings that are not necessarily pleasant or might evoke feelings of hopelessness. However, I'm here to encourage you that there are solutions. MAID is not always the option. MAID or suicide is not always the option, the last resort that an individual can go to. There are other resources that are of value that will not only save a life of an individual, the lives of their family, and enhance interpersonal relationships in general in society. So I like to preface this episode once again to say that the approach I'm taking today and throughout the month of this month and my practice in general is to employ critical thinking in the people I serve, be it in a leadership position, people I coach, and so on. So in the same token, as I employ critical thinking, I like to evoke critical thinking to from my listener as well, or to my listener, if you will, however you want to phrase that. So with not much ado, I am going to share my screen just to give you a visual of who the main characters in this movie is. I don't think I've shared yet what the movie is, but the movie is going to be called The Switch. The 1993 version is a movie, okay? So some of you, while I'm getting my screen ready to share with you, some of you might say, why is she always sharing movies from the past? That's an excellent question, but have you not heard how history tends to repeat itself? And as I enlarge my screen there, I'll show you the main characters. As you know, history does tend to repeat itself. The question is, are we listening? Are we learning from history? Or are we letting the same things that happened in the past continue to happen? So as I get my pointer here, the main characters, sorry, this first image here is a little bit blurry. I couldn't find one that was less blurry, but I wanted to share the two. So the movie is titled The Switch. It is based on a true story. So yes, there was an actual individual that when we discussed this movie that actually lived. And I want to make it clear that everything I discussed today is based solely on the movie, not on historical facts, but solely on the movie. I invite you to research afterwards the historical facts if you choose to. Nevertheless, who are the main characters? So right here, this gentleman here is Mr. Larry McAfee. He's the same person here. Over here, we have a gentleman by the name of Mr. Ross Fine. He is a radio show host. And this is his wife beside him. Her name is Dee, and she's the same lady featured here on the left, okay? With that said and done, let us stop sharing our screen for now. Okay, so I'm gonna give a high level overview of this movie. And as we talk some more, again, it's based on a true story, and I invite you to just listen, and then we're gonna analyze it a little bit and provide solutions, okay? Now, this movie begins with Mr. Larry McAfee, who I refer to Larry moving forward, riding his motorbike with a friend. You could see the glee on his face. Some might call youthful exuberance, but here he is happy doing what he loves. The next thing we see is he crashes into a stone, a big stone on the road, and he goes flying. The result, the outcome, he now becomes a quadriplegic due to a C2, cervical spine 2 injury. He's a quadriplegic. And now he's rendered to a wheelchair. He has a tracheostomy. He needs a ventilator. He needs individuals assisting him with activities of daily living, meaning activities to do with grooming, feeding, emptying his bowels and bladder. So you can imagine what a drastic life change. But before that, who was he? Or I should say, who is he? What is his personhood? So he was a mechanical engineer. Socially, the way it was depicted in the movie, he appeared to be what one might call a Casanova or a player. And what activities did he like to partake of? He loved everything outdoors related. He loved volleyball, he loved canoeing. These were what was shown in the movie. So now fast forward, he's had this character, this motorcycle, yeah, nice word, new word created, motorcycle injury, accident rather, which has rendered him a quadriplegic. Now, his home state is Georgia, okay? In the course of events, sadly, he's unable to just partake of the services in Georgia. He has to be transferred to a different state, Alabama. Now, just sit back and just imagine. So at this point in time, based on my understanding from what I could glean from the movie, his accident occurred in his late 20s. And afterwards, when he partakes of some self-advocacy efforts, by then he's at least 34 years old. So just to give you a little bit about the time frame and his age before the accident, during, and when he advocates for himself. So I kind of went ahead of myself there, but just wanted to preface that just in case I forget to mention that later on. So here he is transferred to Alabama to a facility. And he has this reputation of having a very negative attitude. Why? He has a pouty mouth. I'm just being diplomatic in my choice of words. Apparently, according to them, he complains a lot. He's cranky. He's not satisfied with anything that's going on. Well, you think about it, what's probably going on. It may not necessarily be his nature. Maybe that's his way of grieving. Now, just think about it. He's a quadriplegic. He can't make use of any of his limbs. The only functioning thing are his mind and his, when I say only functioning things, to the onlooker, his mind and his mouth. Those are the things apparently he appears to have control over. So he's using his speech, one might say, in a not conducive manner, hence his reputation for having a pouty mouth. I'm paraphrasing there, okay? So with life like this, he decides at one point in time, life is not worth living. I am going to create a switch to end my life. You're like, how is that possible? Or remember his profession. He was a mechanical engineer at a very successful company. So again, even though he's lost the use of his limbs, his mind is still highly functional. So he's able to design the switch. But the only thing is, of course, he needs an individual to physically create it for him and then install it and implement it to take his life. And what exactly would that look like? Apparently, it's literally a little square of some sort, in my own words, a switch that is embedded or to be embedded in his ventilator to shut off the air supply. And that way he will die. Okay. Now, given such a request, the dilemma is, or the conundrum is, who will install it? Number one, who's going to agree to create it? Number two, who's going to agree to assist him without being criminally charged for assisting him to take his own life? And third, who will install it? So he seeks the help of his friend, Frank, I believe, who is his best friend, at least that's the impression I got from the movie, or his closest friend at the time, tells me about his plan. And then the question remains, yes, okay, you want me to do this, but we need a lawyer. We need a lawyer who will agree to this. They do find a lawyer. Frank finds a lawyer on Larry's behalf. The lawyer meets with Larry and basically said, I'm willing to take your case. Your friend warned me about me, but the only way by which I will agree to take your case, condition, I should say, is you have to watch your mouth. You have to watch your language. You can't just have anger outbursts just like that. So there we have it. So based on that, Larry agrees and his lawyer takes on his case. Now, in the midst of this, Larry has to be transferred sometimes from one facility to the other, either because they believe he has poor behavior, poor interpersonal skills based on his language, always complaining and everything, he's not happy, they transfer him elsewhere, or he runs out of certain resources, financial resources to accommodate him at a particular site, he has to be transferred. So at one point in time where he's in a facility, his lawyer, so basically a hearing is held in this facility before he's transferred back to his home state of Georgia, because at this point in time, it sounds like his funds have dwindled and he's been in a nursing home. Now, I didn't mention that earlier. The facilities he's been going to is a nursing home because that's the only facility that can accommodate his needs at that time. So here, fast forward, he's in the hearing, and parties that are present, according to my understanding, are a judge, an assessor of some sort. When I say assessor, based on the questions he was asking, it sounded like assessing his emotional well-being, mental well-being, and so forth. So the judge, an assessor, a lawyer, his parents, Larry, those are the individuals I remember around his bed at his hearing in the facility. And the reason was they believed it should be done then, prior to him going to Georgia, because things could change. So the judge is listening to Larry's story, listening to his parents' reports, and he reads that's an excerpt of Larry's disposition. And I read it to you right now. Larry has written, I've been rendered helpless in life without enjoyment in life. It is my sincere wish to be allowed to terminate my medical treatment by only activating a switch that will turn the ventilator off. The judge then asked him, is that a true indication of your wishes? Larry's response is this: you get to the point where you realize this is your life. And in my case, it ceases to be worth living. So basically saying, yes, it is indeed his wishes. And then the assessor, quote unquote, the person I call an assessor, not accessor, assessor, asked him, have you found any moments of joy in your life? What about when you spend time with your parents? And then he responded, yeah, at times there are moments of joy, but basically ends that conversation by saying it's not permanent. So the judge also hears his parents' side of view. His mom says basically that this is the most difficult decision she's ever had to make, saying yes to her son because those are his wishes. The father basically said that he believes that the state has failed his family, that he pays his taxes regularly. He doesn't understand why they cannot provide the facilities that he needs to care for him, that there is a prison, he kind of motioned over yonder, where there are prisoners, people who don't pay their taxes are put in prison. Well, maybe he shouldn't pay his taxes and then he'll go to prison. So basically he's saying this, you can see he's venting, he's grieving, where he feels that the system has failed them. We're not providing the mere resources that he believes his son requires. So now I pause there before I continue to ask you one question. I highly recommend you watch this movie. In the course of watching the movie, something caught my eye. Larry's mother was wearing a necklace of, some might say, significance. The question I ask you without giving it out is this: do you think what she was wearing is congruent or was congruent with the decision she made in terms of agreeing with her son to take his life? I'll let you, your peers, colleagues, family, supervisors discuss that. Now, back to the movie, back in the time period we're talking about. Based on the family's report and Larry's report, the judge grants Larry's wish. Okay. Now, the lawyer says to him, we've won this right now, but you have to act fast. Why? Because someone out there could appeal that decision. Okay. Larry wants to spend one more Easter time with his family before he enacts his wishes. Now, the next question is, who indeed will enact his wishes, being who will feel comfortable installing this switch in his ventilator? In comes the radio show host. So at this point in time, Larry's case has become public. He becomes a public figure. A radio host who I mentioned earlier by the name of Mr. Russ Fine, who I'll refer to Russ moving forward, hears about his story, decides to visit him at a nursing home, I guess back in Georgia at this point in time. Forgive me if I'm mistaking the location, but anyway, back where he's in a nursing home, that's definitely where Mr. Ross goes to track him down to invite him to be a guest on his show. Now, prior to that, when he was in the nursing home, when I say prior to that, before Mr. Ross introducing himself, one of the nurses or attendants in the facility turns the radio on for Larry to hear what the public is thinking about his case. One person says, why doesn't he just throw the switch? Why doesn't he just do it and save us a bunch of tax dollars? Very insensitive comments, but he gets an idea of what the public is thinking of his decision here. Mr. Ross comes in, finds him and says, I'd like you to be a guest on my show. You're now a public figure. And at first, Larry's a little bit worried of Ross. What is he after? Is he just trying to make a buck or two? Like, why? But he consents. But then the issue is this: to that point in time, Larry has no access to a hands-free telephone. It was because Russ has come trying to integrate logistics and plan the logistics of how this interview can happen. They've decided there's no way it can happen at the radio station, because Larry's main attendant featured in the movie by the name of Hank, had said it's very difficult transferring him from any location, let alone to a radio station. So basically the radio station is going to come to him, hence the discussion of the hand-free telephone. Ross decides, we're going to install one for you, but he had to consent to the interview. He consented, the device is installed. So he's an interview on this guest, says his points of view, other callers are asking and so forth. And then at some point in time, he has an episode. What I mean by that, with such conditions, with a cervical or spine injury, there's a condition called autonomic dysreflexia. I'll let you look it up. But my point is there are challenges to go with such an injury, okay? So, but however, though, there was one instance where he had an episode, and what was the key episode featured? One of the attendants was grooming him in what looked to be a pub room with a lift, mechanical lift, attended by just one healthcare attendant. I pause there. That's a big no-no. And thankfully, in the province where I reside, at least in the facility that I've worked in, the policy states you need at least 2 individuals to attend to anyone when a mechanical lift is being used, either for transfer from bed to chair or for grooming in the tub and so forth. So right there, back to the movie. At one point in time, as he's bathing him, Larry is in what looks like a stretcher, an archaic looking stretcher. He's bathing him, showering his head. Somehow he starts falling, but thankfully the aide reaches out and catches him. But that frazzled both of them. But Larry was specifically very upset, irate, and angry, and contributed to emotional distress. He wanted to end his life. He was no one could calm him down. The nurse at the facility contacts Russ, because at this point in time, fast forward, Russ and him have formed this bond whereby Larry considers Russ a friend and takes his advice. So Russ comes, finds him in this emotional state, and he's definitely, I want to end my life. Russ is the one who later on agreed to install the switch in his ventilator. And once that was done, he said to him, it's done. And he says to Larry, see you in the morning? Larry's response is, you bet. So you can only imagine Russ cannot sleep the entire night, or I'm imagining artistic liberty that he has a restless night. But the movie shows a scene in the morning. He's staring outside of the window. His wife is in bed. The phone rings. I could see Russ stiffen up. What I infer from his motions and nonverbals is that he probably does a phone call from the facility calling to let him know that Russ is dead. But no, it was actually Larry. Sorry, my apologies, that Larry was dead. But it was actually Larry on the phone, on the end of the phone call. At this point in time, Russ had not told his wife anything. She knew something had happened the night before, but Russ did not confide in her. Now, fast forward, Larry basically later tells him that he couldn't do it, that Russ gave him the one thing that he needed, which was control. That's all he wanted. By installing the switch, that's the control he had to end his life or keep it, at least in his opinion. So going back to something very important I should mention, after he had the episodes of the near fall and other things, fearful, when the device was not installed, he was crying, he was emotional. The nurse had also mentioned to them that after such episodes of emotional distress or whatever it might be, or physiological distress, it's very important that a friend is nearby because they usually suffer from depression afterwards. So that's why they reached out to Russ, okay? Now, when he's decided he will not take his life, you could see him becoming very proactive. At this point in time, earlier in the movie, when the judge had granted the request, an individual who happens to be physically disabled, the movie didn't really say what his condition was, but he was in a wheelchair. You could tell he was an advocate for pro-life and was advocating for how disability services don't get enough funding as they need to. So one comment he had made when the judge had granted Larry's request was, they better find a lawyer who has all his ducks in a row because we will be fighting this. So basically implying they will probably appeal the decision. Okay. Now fast forward, Larry decides not to take his life. He's now proactive, looking for other alternatives. He goes to this independent living facility where this protester, I'll just call him a protester, I can't remember what his name was in the movie, resided. And when he came into this environment, he was amazed. Why? He could see people with physical challenges, regardless of what it was. They were actively working. They earned an income. They paid their taxes. They were contributing to society. They actually hired the healthcare workers working at that facility. And then the processor chuckled as well, because he's narrating the story. He also said, we also fired them if we need to as well. Anyway, so you could see there was hope ignited in Larry when he sees all this. So he was going to spend all a few days in an independent living facility. He didn't have enough funds for a long lasting time. So sadly, which meant he had to go back yet again to a nursing home, which he dreaded and did not want to go. So now I'm going to fast forward real quick because I see we only have 6 minutes left. So the next thing is this. What happens is that between Russ, the radio show host, decides to contact a politician in their environment in Georgia, tells me about Larry's story, asks Larry if he will be interested in talking to him. Cut a long story short, they end up talking. He goes to Georgia. This is a big event in court, a big hearing with a judge, the senators, citizens filling the courtroom. At least I thought it was a courtroom. He shares his story and says, you know what, there are other, Larry, when given the floor, I'm paraphrasing, said, there are other alternatives. I do not want to go back to a nursing home. Basically saying that the people are older, they have nothing in common. Although he's not physically able, he's able to work using his mind because he was coaching people when he was at that independent living facility for that period of time. The judge hears his story. The state of Georgia grants his request. And because of his advocacy effort, what happens? The first ever statewide, as in Georgia, independent living facility was established thanks to his work of advocacy. Now, real quick, let me take a sip of water. Solutions. I say quite a few solutions there. One thing I want to mention is I have worked in environments like this. I was a director of care of a facility that had independent, supportive, assisted, and long-term care. So I could totally visualize everything happening in this movie, and the solutions I'm going to provide to you, I attest to you. I can attest to them because I employed it. I coached the staff that worked with me to do the same, and families. So real quick, with 5 minutes left, okay. What's the first solution? For individuals who are feeling helpless, hopeless because of physical or mental challenges or isolation, the first thing is increase your quality of life. Who were they before their accident or injury or in that state they're in? They do have hobbies. Try to enhance those hobbies or skills within their personal capabilities. There's always a way one can do it. Second, increase their sense of control. Ask their permission. Don't just think, oh, because they're rendered helpless physically, you have to do everything. Ask them, even if you're helping them feed, what do you want to eat? When would you like to eat? Include them, right? Third, always make sure there's a companion or there's a family member or friend, especially when there's an emotional distress or if they have some medical appointment that might be physiological, emotionally and mentally tasking. Have someone that will be with them post-event, not just during. During is good if possible, but also post, because that's where depression can set in as well. Okay, so I say put in the funds needed, allocate in your budget for that companion care. Yes, it might be companion care has to be paid. Yes, you need to allocate for that because families need their respite care as well, right? They can't always be there. Friends can always be there. So if they're not there, who can? Companion care. Remember the story I mentioned in the last episode? Watch the last episode. And last but not least, adopt someone who has a physical or mental challenge or is an elderly, and when I say an elderly, sorry, what I meant to say, a senior in a nursing care home or disability facility. Adopt them. What do I mean? Either speak to them regularly, face-to-face if you can, on the phone call. Letters are good, but there's something very important about that face-to-face phone call. Face-to-face meetings or over the phone where they can hear your voice, okay? So one thing I want to mention to you, I did not plan to include this today, but as the time was drawing nigh for this episode, I felt this strong nudging that I need to share this with you. So about 10 years ago or so, guess what? I received a very interesting voice message. Unbeknownst to me, according to the voice message, this person had, because this is what they left, and I'm paraphrasing, they called the wrong number and somehow got my voice message. And their voice message to me was, it's nice to know there are people out there who still care because, and if I'm not mistaken, the next thing he said made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Because it's nice to know that there are nice people out there who care or something like that, because I was just thinking about taking my life. Now, when I heard that voice message, you can imagine what thoughts went through my mind. I was thankful, number one. Till today, I still have no recollection of what my voice message said. Even currently, I have a voice message that people still like. And they've said, oh, that's a nice voice message. I don't know what it says. And I've said not to change it. My point is you don't know what action, what words, what gesture you would do that can save a life. Okay. Now, call to action real quick. What stood out to you based on today? What will you do about it? How can we improve nursing homes so that people will feel it's not the last place they ever want to be in? I invite you to write your MP of whatever locality you belong to, not just the MP, but operators of nursing homes and other facilities, assisted living, supportive living, people with mental challenges or disabilities, to provide solutions so that MAID is not an option or people taking their own lives via suicide, okay? You might say, I've tried all this, but nothing's happening. Or I need help in planning and implementing this. Well, you've come to the right place. I invite you to visit my website at shalomeagleswings.care. One of the consultation services I provide is strategic management. And the reason why I share that with you is important because I can help you in the planning for a new service or an existing service and implementation for services and interventions that would help service solutions, not just for individuals who are vulnerable, like mentioned, but all your residents or clients in your facility, okay? Now, before you leave, I'd like to invite you to join me next time, same place for another episode of the Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA. But remember, you're here in this world right now for a reason. Your life has not been taken. You're alive, and while looking at me, you haven't passed on from a natural death. That means you're here for a reason. So remember, you are needed in this world to be a solution. Be the best that you can, and do not rob the world of a precious gem. You, that's right. Goodbye, and have a splendid day. Goodbye.